Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Brad Barnett.
That's the power of love. That's the power of love.
Good morning, good morning. I will not sing the good morning song to you, although it is rattling around in my head. Did you guys have fun last night at the welcome reception? I also want to give props to all of the people who came out to the 5K walk run yesterday morning. It was fantastic. Everyone finished vertically, which is good. You don't want horizontal finishers at a 5K. So thanks for coming out and raising money for charity. Before we get into the awards, I think we probably want to address the elephant in the room this morning, which is the Supreme Court has come out with a decision on debt forgiveness. It has officially been struck down, so debt forgiveness will not be happening. NASFA has put out a statement. You can see that at nasfa.org/SCOTUS. So there is a statement out there. We do have a session, an Inside the Beltway session this afternoon at 4 o'clock, where we'll talk a little bit more about that. But just so you know, the room only holds 438 people. With that said, please don't worry. I think you know and have confidence that NASFA will have you covered on this. There will be information on Off the Cuff. There'll be information in NASFA Daily News coming out. So there's going to be a lot more information coming out from NASFA to you about this. But we did want to just address it and let you know that a decision has been made and is out there. And NASFA is talking to reporters today, so there's lots of action and activity going on. So just stay tuned. There is more coming from NASFA. All right, with that, it is an honor to be here this morning to start the day by giving some awards to a few of our colleagues and our friends. And it's really special for me to be able to present these this morning because our award recipients today are people who I would call longtime friends and people who I've had the opportunity to work with in one capacity or another for years at NASFA. So it's exciting to be able to honor them in front of you. Today, we're going to be bestowing the award to 3 people, the NASFA Lifetime Achievement Award. Previous called the Lifetime Membership Award, the board changed the name to emphasize the individual's lifetime achievements. The award continues to bestow lifetime membership in NASFA and is the very highest the association can offer a member. The achievements and contributions of the individual must truly be outstanding and significant. Our first recipient today, I'm pleased to announce Lisa Hopper, Dean of Student Financial Services at National Park College in Hot Springs, Arkansas, as our first recipient of the NASFA Lifetime Achievement Award. You guys also know I am deep from Arkansas, so go Pigs. For over 30 years, Lisa has been helping students and financial aid peers. To Lisa, it's been a calling that took her from CPA work to roles within the university finance and finally to our financial aid community. As she leads the financial aid office at National Park College, Lisa has also been committed to the professional development of financial aid staff. She is a mentor and friend to many in her region and nationally. Even as president of SWASFA and her many leadership roles in the state, regional, and national levels, she makes everyone feel heard and needed at all levels. She has served in many capacities, including as ASFA's treasurer and president. Lisa has also been very involved in the national level, serving on the National Board of Directors, as well as several task forces. Lisa, would you please come forward and receive your award?
I feel like I just won the Olympics or something. So John F. Kennedy once said, "We must find time to stop and thank the people who make differences in our lives." Thank you, NASFA, for giving me this chance on my very last work day of my 25-year career in financial aid and 31 years in higher ed to do that and stop and say thank you. First, I have to thank my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, because my belief is, but by the grace of God, I am what I am, and He has blessed me with these opportunities. I have to thank my husband of 39 years, Brad, who's in the audience today. He hates to fly, and he did this for me. He's always supported my dreams. Thank my children, Megan and Dalton, who've enjoyed a lot of Mom's business trips over the years. And thank my bonus son, Chris, and bonus daughter, Maddie, and my 4 grandchildren, Isabel, Elliot, Briley, and Hudson. If you're my Facebook friend, you have met my grandchildren. My heartfelt thanks goes to my work family, especially my financial aid crew, Gail, Gayla, Tusha, Joy, Tennille, and Amy. Thank my administration at National Park College in Hot Springs, Arkansas. I have to thank some of my VPs. Janice Sawyer introduced me to financial aid. She was my predecessor and taught me a lot. Dr. Jerry Thomas, who is one of my biggest fans and my recent VP for 7 years, and my new VP, Darla Thurber, who allowed me to attend this conference, and I helped her with her financial aid. Big hugs and love to my dear friends in financial aid in NASFA and SWASFA and ASFA that I need to thank for lifting me up with their smiles, and especially the ones who thought enough of me to nominate me for this award. Thank the students who have returned to tell me I have made a difference in their lives and have shared their success stories. These are the true rewards when you're called into this profession, and those of you who've been in this a long time know that it is a calling. I'll close with one other quote from JFK. As we express our gratitude, we must never forget the highest appreciation is not to utter words, but to live by them. I give you my promise to always strive to deserve the honor you've bestowed on me today. Thank you so very much.
Congratulations. Man, what a way to go out. Your last day on the job. You get an award at NASFA. This is like a mic drop moment. Well played, Lisa. Well played. Next, I'm pleased to announce we will bestow the Lifetime Achievement Award to Lori Vetter, Interim Vice Provost of Enrollment Management and Director of Financial Aid at the University of Michigan, Flint. Lori has dedicated her career to helping students through financial aid and enrollment. She has always been a champion of our profession and has continuously served at the state, regional, and national level. Lori has especially been active in advocating for foster youth throughout her career. She has served as president for her state, regional associations, and also as the 2018-19 national chair for NASFA. She has most recently represented her state by serving on the MASFA 60th Anniversary Conference Committee. She has a long career in our profession and is a recognized leader across the country. Lori is respected by her colleagues and is loved by many for her encouragement and mentorship of young professionals on their journey in the financial aid field. Lori, please come forward and accept your award.
Wow, thank you, Lisa. I'm envious. I'm sure several of us are right about now. Thank you, everyone. I am so deeply honored to receive this recognition and to have the privilege to work in a profession amongst 29,000 other amazing, talented, and hardworking individuals. I think today brings to me confirmation that the path I chose in financial aid and the passion that I have had for these past 35 years was the right one for me. I'd like to thank my family for their love and support over these years. And I would also like to add many thanks to my mentors and friends that I have made in this profession. You know who you are. I thank you deeply for touching my life and being so supportive and part of my growth in this profession. I just want you to know, if you are a mentor of mine, I have made every attempt and continue to this week to pay it forward. Matter of fact, if they're in the audience, I have 4 amazing mentees that are first-time attendees to this conference. If they're here, would they stand? Lindsay, Caleb, Sandy, and Alvian, are you here? Remember these faces, folks, because they are going places if they're not already. Thank you, guys. You've been great. I could go on this morning, but I know our minds are focused on all the learning we have to do over these next couple of days, especially with the coming changes to FAFSA simplification. In all honesty, I thought about coming up here today with a scroll of papers like Senator Alexander did to drive home his point about simplification, but then I realized that I would need the entire NASFA team and more to bring a couple of hand trucks up here with the documents it would now take to show him what has happened to simplification. So I passed that up. But let me leave you with this. As we go through these changes, please remember that we are not alone. As I said earlier, there are 29,000 of us going through this at the same time. So whether you are a large school with a staff of 60 or a small school with only 1 or 2 in the financial aid office, no matter how near or far our institutions are from one another, we're here for each other. We're only as far away as an email, a phone call, or a text. So please reach out. So with that, I say, let's walk side by side through these next couple of years as we learn and adapt and go through these changes together. We've got this. Hang in there. With all my love and respect for all that each of you do, thank you, and have a great conference.
Thank you, Lori, and for putting yet another song in my head. You are not alone. I am here with you. All right, one more to go. I'm pleased to present our final Lifetime Achievement Award to Karen Kraus, Executive Director, Office Financial Aid Scholarships and Veterans Benefits Processing at University of Texas at Arlington, and your NASFA Choir Director. Karen truly personifies the ideal of service to the financial aid profession. For the past 30 years, she has been a tireless volunteer for NASFA, as well as Texas and SWASFA associations. Karen has served as a NASFA board member from 1999 to 2004. She has served on the NASFA Nominations and Elections Committee, conference committees, awards committees, and as commission director for NASFA. She's also been on several NASFA task forces. So we're just naming a few. In addition to Karen, has taught thousands of Texas financial aid administrators some of the toughest subject matter in our industry for an incredible 17 years straight as a faculty member at the TASFA New Aid Officers Workshop. She is viewed with such admiration and respect that she has served on the President's Advisory Council for every TASFA president since 2006. This sustained record of service and leadership illustrates Karen's commitments to the goals of NASFA and the most strict and consistent adherence to the ethics of the financial aid profession. Karen, would you please come forward and accept your award?
Wow. About 6 weeks ago, I got a call or an email from Natasha on the NASFA staff telling me that I was getting an award. They don't tell you what award, they just tell you you're getting an award. And I immediately felt a wide range of emotions. I was surprised, I felt gratitude, but then I thought, what in the world are they thinking? And I don't know how I'm gonna get that home without breaking it. That's what I'm thinking right at the moment. Justin, I got into financial aid accidentally. You talked about that yesterday. I took a job. My husband was in graduate school, and now I realize I interviewed at 2 different universities, and both of those jobs were in financial aid in July. I didn't put that together at the time, but I've sort of figured that out. But who knew that this would become a career? Honors like this don't happen in a vacuum. You've already heard that by the others that have been up here. And Lisa, go SWASFA, huh? There are 2 of us here. My various bosses at the 4 institutions, the 4 universities that I've served, have encouraged me to be active in the financial aid community, allowed it and encouraged it. The staffs that I've worked with at all of those schools have been very supportive. And to pick up the slack to make it possible for me to be involved in TASFA, the Texas TASFA, SWASFA, and of course NASFA. 2 of my staff are here today, and I'm pleased that they're with me here in San Diego. My husband, Ken, hasn't always known which FA I was attending. He just simply asked where I was going and when I would be home. As a professional musician, he's not been able to join me very, very often at these conferences, so I think some of you don't really believe he exists, but I do have pictures of him on my phone. I'll show them to you. And I wish he could tag along a little more often. But he is quick to remind me that it is okay to leave work at 5, at least sometimes, and that I can take a break occasionally. I also want to say thanks to NASFA for the work you do on behalf of the financial aid profession and on behalf of our students. We wouldn't have survived the alphabet soup of CARES, CRISA, HERF, whatever those other letters are, without all the guidance that we received. And your training and advocacy work are very appreciated as we move into this new chapter with SAI, and I'm going to call it Better FAFSA, Better Future, not simplification. For those of you who haven't been doing this as long as I have, and I have been doing it a long time now, 2 of the best things to me about being in this profession are the colleagues who become friends, and some of you know who you are in the audience here, and the students that we serve. The regulations and red tape can sometimes make it feel like we don't make much of a difference. We get bogged down. So I was looking for a word to describe what we do, and I came up with the word worthy. Worthy is an old-fashioned word, but it means having value, being honorable and meritorious, or being sufficiently important. And please know that what we do every day is worthy and it is good. Thank you all.
What an honor to bestow the awards to these individuals. Okay, are you ready for your first FAFSA simplification session? I knew it was going to come out sooner or later, sorry. All right, you may have noticed in this program that we have a lot of FAFSA simplification content for you, and today we are proud to have our first session. I'm going to introduce to you one of the moderators of the session and speakers of the session to come forward and take things over. So at this time, I would like to invite Gail Holt, Dean of Financial Aid, Amherst College, and Chair of NASFA's FAFSA Simplification Working Group, to come to the podium and introduce the presenters for the rest of the session and get things started. Gail.
Leader of the pack. One day my dad said, find someone new.
Welcome. My pack is still coming up. But it is a pleasure to open this foundational topic to all of our work and share. We're sharing the job really of interpreting legislation and implementing successfully for our students. And we get to do that with our colleagues at the Department of Education. We get to do that with our colleagues that you are sitting with And this is going to stretch us, this is going to grow us, and we are ready for the challenge. In this opening session, and as Brad said, there are several other sessions during the conference. There will be a detailed Student Aid Index closing session on Sunday that I hope you can attend, as well as perspectives about the change to the Student Aid Index today, this afternoon at 2:45, in addition to some other sessions as well. But today we have Karen McCarthy, who is our very own NASFA Vice President of Public Policy and Federal Relations with us. And Karen really provides a financial aid administrator's on-the-ground perspective in federal student aid policy discussions and debates. So you hear Karen on Off the Cuff and her guidance. I am privileged to have known Karen at the start of her school experience in financial aid. She has worked at Boston University, where we got the opportunity to work together, but she's also been a financial aid administrator at Miami University of Ohio and the Ohio State University. She's been at NASFA since 1999, but been with the policies team since 2010. So thank you, Karen. We also have the privilege this morning of hearing from Kira Mosley Hobbs, and who is, of course, works for the Department of Education. And Kira has a 20-year career in post-secondary education. She has been a financial aid expert in policy implementation and a liaison for the FAFSA, student eligibility, verification, needs analysis, homeless youth, foster youth, incarcerated students, community outreach, and experimental states initiatives. So she has a wealth and vast experience, and we're excited for her to share that with us today. And also from the Department of Education is Kellis Robbins. And Kellis is a project specialist and has been serving as a project manager in the past with student aid and borrower eligibility reform development, but she's also project owner of the Federal Student Aid Estimator. So she's been bringing a human-centered design to the higher education experience. And for that, we are grateful and look forward to her contributions and sharing with us ways that we can partner together in bringing FAFSA simplification to our students. So we will kick it off. We will have the session. We invite you to bring your questions as we get to the Q&A portion. And just remember that some of the more detailed questions about SAI, you will have an opportunity to do that if we don't have a ton of time this morning. Also, I just want to remind you that the Ask a Fed is back at NASFA, and so you can visit and ask your questions with Ask a Fed, and it is conveniently located near the what do we call it? The animal experience, or the de-stressing. So I think many of our campuses have those opportunities for our students. So maybe it's good that we can take advantage of them well. So I turn it over to Kira. Thank you.
I think I'm being forced to stand because the clicker was up here. That's okay. If you saw me this morning, I walked over here without my heels on. I put them on, and then they make me stand. So we'll see how it works. First, thank you for NASFA for not having us march out from Star Wars: The Imperial Returns. I appreciate that very much. If you hear from my bio, FAFSA simplification, it completely exploded my world. at Department of Education. Everything that it changed was my subject matter expertise at Department of Education. So the law passed, I took a week off. I'm not kidding. So what I'm going to do here is I need to make the assumption that the majority of you know the basics because you laughed at his fast for complication joke. So what I'm going to try to do today is go touch the basics a little bit, but I'm going to try to point out the things about FAFSA simplification that you should really pay attention to as you move forward throughout the other sessions as you go about, and as you develop your new policies and procedures and how you're going to move forward in your offices. Does that sound good? Okay. And please, if you have questions, I'm going to be nice today and try not to speak slowly to spend all the time talking like, oh, so sorry, no more time for Q&As. And actually do Q&As today. But if we do run out of time for Q&As, you guys have a special treat this time. Those of us in policy who are here will actually go to AXAFED to try to field some of your most complicated questions that we are helping the training officers and everyone get the information out, okay? So you can pet a yoga goat while you ask these really hard questions. Now, if you happen to stunt someone in policy, you will win our forever impressiveness because we can't give you anything else under the law. So let's get started. So what we're going to talk about today is the legislation, implementation overview, Better FAFSA, Better Future, Better Pizza, Papa John's, 24-25 FAFSA experience, and we'll leave you some resources and some references. As you can see, comedy is the way I try to lighten the room, which is why I was given the first session. So for the legislation, so you have to pay attention to, it actually takes 3 pieces of legislation to make FAFSA simplification happen. The fact that it needed 3 pieces of legislation is also kind of why the implementation of it was a little complicated, right? So the first legislation that starts FAFSA simplification is the Future Act, which passed December 2019. And the Future Act is what created our connection with the IRS. So the Future Act is what gets rid of the IRS DRT and creates the new, what we're calling the FADDX, so that we get the information directly from the IRS. The Future Act, however, tells us specifically what we can get from the IRS. So anything that is not listed in the Future Act, the IRS will not give to us. So that's the first time our hands are tied. Okay? The Future Act is also where we see the requirement of consent for federal student aid eligibility now. So when you see on the FAFSA where we say consent is required from all contributors, it's because the Future Act requires consent for federal student aid eligibility. So that's what I want you to pay attention to. Now, FAFSA Simplification Act falls under the Consolidated Appropriations Act that passed December 27th, 2020. The Consolidations Appropriations Act, if we do Schoolhouse Rock, I'm not a bill, it's the Appropriations Act, and they just threw a whole bunch of laws together and passed it together. And so somewhere around page 1025 of that 5,000-page bill is the FAFSA Simplification Act. So if you can see, my world exploded right around Christmas. And before the new year, it was a horrible experience. That's it. So FAFSA Simplification Act changes everything that we know. So that's what changed the FAFSA application. That's what changes the EFC into the SAI. That's what changes the needs analysis formula. And I'm saying the needs analysis formula, even though all my veterans know needs analysis creates the EFC, which is the new SAI. But I'm saying it a little differently because it also creates a separate formula for Pell Grant eligibility under FAFSA simplification. It also creates the new program, the Pigeon Educational Program, which is based on the Second Chance Pell experiment that we've been doing since 2014 to test returning Pell Grants to incarcerated students and how the administration of that would work should Congress choose to change the law and remove the prohibition of it. FAFSA Simplification Act also require a lot of reporting requirements, things of that sort. If you've been bored and you've read the FAFSA Simplification Act, you can see that there's a lot of strong language in there now that also ties our hands literally about what we can ask on the FAFSA. FAFSA Simplification Act is when Congress says to us, you can't ask any more questions other than what we tell you in this law. And what is missing from the law? Everybody's favorite housing question is gone. Womp womp in the law. And then they had us ask for a number in college and then didn't do anything with it. So that took a lot of conversation to figure that out. Now, when we were planning the implementation of the FAFSA Simplification Act, we go through the process of trying to figure out how it works, how things changes, and how to move ahead. In doing that, we see a couple areas where things don't vibe right or things contradict each other. Congress notices that also, and so you have some technical corrections in the Consolidation Appropriations Act of 2022 that was signed into law in March 2022. So we have the Future Act that got rid of the DRT. We have the FAFSA Simplification Act that changes everything, and then we have to wait to some extent for the FAFSA Simplification Technical Corrections Act to correct some, I don't want to call errors. I feel like as a federal employee, I'm not supposed to say Congress did something wrong. But the things that weren't really implementable in the FAFSA Simplification Act. So we have 3 years of law changes in the midst of us having to redo and rebuild everything. So we were building a moving train. And so that's why I want you to feel sorry for us and be nice. So implementation overview, you know the FAFSA simplification timeline. You've seen some of the changes on the FAFSA simplification slowly go into effect. I'm not going to get too much into that. I think Melanie touches this a little bit more tomorrow morning. But you see the full implementation of the FAFSA Simplification Act starting with the 24-25 award year. Of note, the prison educational program that is in the FAFSA Simplification Act is actually effective July 1, 2023. So that's one of the biggest changes in FAFSA Simplification Act that comes in 23-24. Pretty soon you should see the Dear Colleague letter come out about the application to do a prison educational program and how that process will work. So some operational changes in 23-24 to pay attention to was the revision of cost of attendance. Most notable there for incarcerated students, and cost of attendance was expanded. They still can't do room and board, but you can cover some of the costs for licensure if you have a prison educational program, but I'll get into that later on. About how the prison educational program provisions and FAFSA simplification changes for incarcerated students in general, not just prison educational programs. In 23-24, we also did the provisions for FAAs to exercise professional judgment in addressing applicants' unusual and special circumstances. Remember, FAFSA Simplification Act creates those categories, but it flipped it as you know it because we were kind of using those terms anyway. So special circumstances is more financial things. Unusual circumstances is more about dependency status. To point out, homeless youth determinations was created in its own category under FAFSA Simplification Act. A homeless youth determination is not a professional judgment because it can technically apply to a population of students. So all incarcerated students can get a homeless youth determination, whereas professional judgment should still be done on a case-by-case basis. Another thing to point out for the professional judgments for dependency status overrides and homeless youth determinations, they will carry forward subsequent award years, so you don't have to do it over and over again. Once you make a homeless youth determination or an unusual circumstance professional judgment, unless you know that the student's circumstances have changed, you really can just carry forward that same judgment for subsequent award years. So that should make it easy for everyone. However, Kellis might point out later on, because we're switching systems where the FAFSA is housed, If you make a professional judgment determination or a homeless youth determination in 23-24, because we rebuild a completely different system, you may have to reset, have to reset the flag in 24-25 to carry over a professional judgment or homeless youth determination to 24-25. Because it's just, the systems are not going to talk to each other. You don't have to collect the documentation over. You don't have to meet with the student again. We would just need you to set the flag again in 24-25. But for 24-25 and carry forward, the flag will just appear in the, what are they called? Renewals. Okay. Federal Pell Grant eligibility. For 23-24, we see the restoration of lifetime eligibility used for borrowers with certain loans discharged and successful borrower defense decline, and the establishment of the prison educational programs. You see the full removal of the selective service and drug conviction questions, and we started collecting race, ethnicity, sex, and gender via involuntary post-application survey. And then we see the carry forward of the 3 existing homeless youth questions, which are now renewal eligible. And again, that's the carry forward of your determination, but you're going to have to reset the flags in 24-25, so don't let that confuse you. Race and ethnicity, sex and gender will not be on your ISAR. Better FAFSA, better future. We're getting to the 24-25. If you are around, please go to Dennis's presentation for the Student Aid Index. I'm not going to get too much into it, but to point out here within the law for other financial aid, they use the term other financial assistance. So you'll see us using that in our terminology, but we know that you use it within your schools a lot of times as other financial assistance that's not your money. And so since they use that terminology in FAFSA simplification, other financial assistance in our documentation and resources is going to be anything that's not federal student aid. And the department still prescribed from writing regulations on the needs analysis, except on cost of attendance that is not tuition and fees. So we cannot regulate the needs analysis formula. Income on the FAFSA will now mostly be provided by the Direct Data Exchange, or the FADDX, and that includes AGI, taxes paid, number of dependents on the IRS tax return, whether the IRS tax form files were scheduled, whether or not they were scheduled, not the information on the schedule. So it's just going to appear as basically like a yes or no, with some caveats about whether or not it was like $50,000 on the Schedule C as required in the FAFSA Simplification Act. And income earned from work. Now, if you're going to write anything down about the changes for SAI, please write this down. Income earned from work is a term that we will continue to use, but it's different than what you know it now. Income earned from work as you know it now is for who? Non-tax filers. So you can get the amount of income that they were using. Income earned from work is now coming from the IRS, and it does not pull from the W-2s. We still do not get tax information from the W-2s. It is coming from the 1040. And that is because if you are a non-tax filer, you're getting an automatic negative 1,500 SAI and maximum Pell eligibility. There is no use for income earned from work other than the charts that are on the back end for the payroll tax allowances to calculate the SAI, which is why it's coming from the 1040. There's no need for income earned from work for non-tax filers because there's nowhere to put it anymore on the FAFSA. It took me a while to wrap my head around that, so I just wanted to point that out to you guys. Most formula tables remain. Protection allowance with slight adjustments to data points. So if you remember, it was the educational asset protection allowance. Now it's just the asset protection allowance. The Social Security tax allowance and the state and local tax allowance have been rolled up into a payroll tax allowance table, and those are the major changes with Student Aid Index, in addition to the removal of number in college from the formula. Remember I said earlier, number in college is still on the FAFSA because it's a data element we are to collect, but it is not used in the SAI calculation. So we will release guidance, if we haven't done it already, that you can use number in college to make an adjustment if you deem it necessary. You can adjust the data element in the SAI if you would like. If you want to ask for some advice on how you might do that, catch me at Ask a Fed, because I don't know if I should say it out loud. It might be a personal opinion. Or you can adjust the cost of attendance, but that is the only use for number in college right now. If you ever done a hand calculation of the EFC, the final calculation right before you get the official EFC, the calculated outcome used to be divided by the number of college. It will not do that anymore. So, number in college almost becomes a professional judgment in sense, but it's not really a professional judgment. Student aid index can be a negative number as low as negative 1,500, but for federal student aid purposes, you treat negative 1,500 as a 0. So what's the point of a negative 1,500? Your guess is as good as ours, but you can use it for your institutional aid. And your state can use it for their aid. You just can't use it for any federal student aid. Those who are not required to file a return in the base year will get an automatic negative 1,500 SAI. Now, it took some maneuvering to figure out how we was going to figure out who was not required to file a tax return, because remember what I said about income earned from work. What did I say? If it's not on the tax return, we don't know income earned from work. So how in the world do you know if someone was required to file? Well, as Lisa said earlier in her acceptance speech, there by the grace of God go I. So we'll figure that out. For Pell Grant eligibility is separate from the SAI in some sense, but will consider the SAI in others. And this is the part that in the past 3 times I've done presentations about the Pell Grant eligibility, people are getting lost, and that's scaring me a little bit. So I need everybody in the first 25 rows that I could see with a light flashing in my head. If we go a little bit over this, if you're not completely lost, kind of nod for me. If you are lost, just go like this, and I can know whether or not I come back after the 4th of July holiday. So maximum Pell Grant eligibility is based on the tax filing status. So if you're a non-tax filer, you get a maximum Pell Grant eligibility. If you are a tax filer, you can still get a maximum Pell eligibility based on your AGI and the poverty level guidelines and family size. And so the poverty level guidelines is not published by the U.S. Department of Education. It's published by one of our sister agencies. I think it's Agriculture publishes poverty level guidelines. For Puerto Rico and the other U.S. territories, you are using the 48 contingent state poverty level guideline chart. For people who are not eligible for a maximum Pell Grant eligibility, you may still get Pell, but it's going to use the SAI in a calculation rather than be based solely on the SAI. So the SAI, of course, replaces the EFC, and you're going to determine a Pell Grant amount by taking the maximum scheduled Pell, which we publish every year, minus the calculated SAI, adjusted for enrollment. Now, because as you see, the Pell Grant eligibility is based on a whole bunch of formulas, that fantastic Pell chart, the Pell schedule and disbursement chart, is that what's his name? Listen, I have been so engrossed in FAFSA simplification, anything that exists now has been replaced. So you're going to see me stumbling over what things are anymore. So the Pell Grant chart that you guys are used to, where we publish it for full-time, 3/4 time, half-time, and less than half-time, that goes away because it has no use. Everything is a formula now. So now we're just going to publish and just remind you, like, hey, here's the obvious. There's a formula. Don't forget to use it. That's what it'll look like. So it's the maximum Pell Grant eligibility minus the calculated SEI adjusted for enrollment. You will see us use the term enrollment intensity when we're explaining to you how to adjust it for enrollment. If you are not eligible for a maximum Pell Grant eligibility, or what we're calling a calculated Pell, which is that second step, you may be eligible for a minimum Pell Grant. Now, minimum Pell Grant we know is 10% of the maximum Pell Award for the year. However, they created a special calculation in FAFSA simplification, so someone who mathematically might not get a minimum Pell Grant, may actually get a minimum Pell Grant calculated only if the student's SEI is greater than the maximum Pell Grant award, and that's also going to be based on poverty level guidelines table. Each step is described in detail in the draft 24-25 Pell Grant Eligibility and Student Aid Index Technical Assistance Manual. Notice that we put the word draft in very large letters. So that's our contingency plan to protect ourselves if we have to change anything. But for the most part, it should be complete and it should be finished. I don't want to scare you guys. I think in that area, we are really confident. So who gets a maximum Pell Grant? We went over that. Non-tax filers, single parents and non-single parents, the poverty level guidelines are different in terms of percentage based on AGI and family size. You see single parents get a larger buffer for poverty level guidelines than non-single parents do in that regard. So keep that in mind. There are different poverty level guidelines percentages between single parents and non-single parents, and that's going to be consistent throughout. For applicants that are ineligible for Max Pell, again, Max Pell minus SAI will get you the Pell Grant unless it's less than a minimum Pell, and then they move back to step 3, which is calculating if they can get a minimum Pell. So I need you guys to get used to the fact that minimum Pell is still a thing, which is 10% of the maximum Pell, but it's also now a formula for eligibility. Two different things. Minimum Pell is still, by definition, 10% of the maximum Pell award, but is also now a formula to determine Pell Grant eligibility. Y'all with me? My first 20 rows are just staring at me like, and I gave y'all clear instructions. Yes, no, okay. Cannot exceed cost of attendance. Pell still cannot exceed cost of attendance. And for less than full-time enrollment, Pell Grant is reduced in direct proportion of enrollment intensity rounded to the nearest whole percentage point. And there was the Pell disbursement and payment schedule. See, we put the note there. For that third bullet, Pell Grant reduced in direct proportion of enrollment intensity rounded to the nearest whole percentage. Keep in mind, the enrollment intensity can be anywhere between 2 and 99 now. So the whole concept of you break down Pell based on 3, 6, 9, and 12 goes away. You base Pell now on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, like that. Now, that probably won't be an issue for most schools because generally your courses are 1 credit, 3 credit, maybe a 4 credit with a lab. So there's a lot of enrollment statistic proportions you're probably not going to have to deal with. But keep in mind, I want to point it out, that you are no longer tied to 3, 6, 9, 12. Okay, so that should be helpful for your students. Terminology to note. You can do some updates for things like family size, professional judgments are still professional judgments, and corrections are still corrections. You may not maintain a blanket policy of denying all PJ requests, but you do not have to approve all PJ requests. Do you understand the difference? So you can't say to a student, or you can't have a policy to say we don't do PJs at all. You have to have a policy where you review a student's request for a PJ, but that does not mean that you have to approve 100% of your request. You must develop your policies and procedures to review PJ requests, and you must publicly disclose the ability to do that. We talked a little bit about the difference between special circumstances and unusual circumstances. Again, usual circumstances is really about dependency status, and special circumstances is really about financial things. And you see, I'm starting to rush because we got to get to Kellis. And I promise, I'm trying to get to some Q&As. Unaccompanied homeless youth policies, you may review all requests for unaccompanied homeless youth determinations, must develop policies and procedures for reviewing homeless youth determinations, and again, the homeless youth determinations will carry forward to subsequent award year, okay? Professional judgments in disaster and emergency economic downturn. I wanted to point out that the law actually gives you the authority to do income earned for work to 0 in disasters, emergencies, and economic downturns. But remember what I said earlier about income earned from work, that it's only being used for the charts behind the scenes to calculate the SAI, and it's only being used for the payroll tax allowance, and I forget the other one, but I think it's the asset protection allowance. So that said, the percentage of the allowances in the payroll tax allowance is not very large and substantial. So if you do a professional judgment and you only adjust the income earned for work, you're not really going to make a huge difference for a student. It's really, if you're trying to reduce income for a student, the AGI that you want to focus on and not the income earned from work. But I do want to acknowledge that the law does say that you can reduce the income earned from work to zero. So really quickly, prison educational programs. Under FAFSA Simplification Act, there's the creation of prison educational programs. And what that also created is that any incarcerated student for Pell Grant eligibility needs to be in a prison educational program. So even if they're in a local prison, they need to be in a prison educational program now. The law also defines an eligible prison educational program. We have an entire resource on the Knowledge Center for Prison Educational Program that gives a lot of the definitions for prison educational program. We outline some of the requirements. When you have a prison educational program, there's additional people that has authority that has to work with you, including oversight entities, and that includes the correctional facilities. We do not have the jurisdiction to tell the correctional facilities what to do within their facilities, so you have to work very closely with them if you do a prison educational program. And keep in mind, you're going to have to show that a prison educational program is in the best interest of the student, and we put that in quotations because we're leaving it up to the oversight entity to define what that means. Also, if you have a prison educational program, you're going to have to do some reporting, and you still have to get that approved through your accreditation agency and perhaps your state agency if that's the way that you want to go. Now, I'm saying all that quickly, but I don't want to scare you away from considering a prison educational program at your schools. It actually went very well for Second Chance Pell programs, and there is a session here for, I think the Vera Institute of Justice, Allen, is doing a presentation of prison educational programs. Vera has been a technical assistant for federal student aid through the Second Chance Pell experiment, so they can answer any questions that you might have about how the current schools doing education in prison and administering Pell Grants, how that is going for them and what their experience is, if there's something that your school is interested in, or if it's something your school is interested in, or your president or your vice president has said, we want to look at it, and you want to know how that works for you as a financial aid administrator, they can connect you to other financial aid administrators who are already doing it that can give you some advice. So the Knowledge Center, under new topics, there's a whole category for prison educational programs that will give you everything that has been published in that area so far. Like I said before, prison educational programs go live July 1, 2023, so they had to work a lot faster in terms of getting everything up and ready compared to FAFSA and SAI and a Pell Grant, the way we have to do. Okay? If you have any questions about prison educational programs, you can shoot them an email at pep@ed.gov. I have access to that email, but I'm not checking it. Okay. 2425 verification changes, no substantial changes. Since you clap, I'm taking credit. You're welcome. There's no substantial changes. We're going to do random selection, and we have to do random selection because everything is new. The machine learning model has no idea what's risky at this point or what it should be looking for. So it's just going to be random. We will continue to try to keep reducing the percentage of FAFSA applicants that are verified, especially with us getting the information straight from the IRS now, kind of like, what's the point? The changes that you will see when we do release the FRN is there is no point to a verification and non-filing anymore because either you have information at the IRS or you don't. But there's no point for verification and non-filing for U.S. tax return filers. You will probably still see that for non-U.S. tax filers. And the other thing is we're going to point out the change in the treatment of income earned from work. Income earned from work will need to be a verifiable item because it's on the tax return, and if we're telling you to verify AGI, it would make sense that we would say, hey, look at income earned from work also while you are there. But other than that, everything else on the FRN, when we release information about verification, you should see more things going away than what you see being added. So, and that's it. So I'm gonna hand you over to Kellis, who will go over the new FAFSA reform with you. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I can't promise I'll be as funny as Kira, but hopefully I will at least get your attention with some of the more visual aspects of the FAFSA experience and give you an idea of what the new form is actually going to look like. As Kira mentioned, for special and unusual circumstances, we are changing the terminology, so I just wanted to quickly talk about how these processes might change for 23-24 versus 24-25. For 23-24, if a student indicates they have a special circumstance, you do have to provide, the student will have to meet with you or provide documentation in order to have that dependency override approved. As Kira mentioned, that will not carry over into 24-25. And so a student who does have unusual circumstances, that is the new term, remember, for like homeless determination, they will have to indicate that again on their 24-25 FAFSA. When they do that, similar process. They will be instructed to either meet with you or provide documentation if needed, or you can simply change that flag over if they did have it in 23-24. And from 24-25 forward, it will carry over. A new difference as well is within 23-24 and within the past, if they did indicate special circumstances, they were not given an aid estimate or an EFC. Going forward, for 24-25, we are creating this new term for that status called provisional independence. So if they submit that they have an unusual circumstance, they will be granted that provisional independence status until you approve that they are actually independent or deny it based on your judgment. And when they submit their FAFSA with that provisional independence status, they will receive an aid estimate and a provisional SAI. Remember, that SAI is replacing the EFC, the Student Aid Index. So they will have an idea of what their aid package could look like if their independence status is granted. Some new concepts. Some of these you will have heard Kira touch on, and I'm just here to expand upon how we are actually implementing these changes based on the legislation. The first three, consent, the FSAID requirements, and the roles and contributors are all tied together. So you're gonna hear me jump forth and back and forth a little bit on those. As Kira mentioned, the Future Act does require that we collect consent for us to check with the IRS to see what data is on file. Everyone who is a party to the FAFSA, the student, any parents or spouses, for example, do have to provide consent for us to check with the IRS, regardless of their tax filing status. If they are a foreign filer, if they have not filed taxes, we still need them to provide consent in order for us to determine whether the student is eligible for aid. If anyone does not provide consent on that form, the student will not be found eligible for federal aid. This ties into the login requirement, the FSAID requirement. We need a way to know that the person providing consent is who they say they are. So we are now requiring that everyone going forward who is participating in a FAFSA create their own FSAID. We know this is a change. Going forward for 24-25, we will no longer allow users online to access, create, or submit a FAFSA just using their PII. They have to be authenticated using an FSAID. To make this happen, however, we have also created new processes to allow those who could not previously create an FSAID do so. This includes those without social security numbers. They can now create FSAIDs. There are some caveats around that, but everyone can get an FSAID. Now to roles and contributors. Roles, I'm sure, are very familiar to you. We have those today, right? We have the student and the parent. In this new world, roles are what we talk about when we say, who can start a FAFSA? The student, as always, can start a FAFSA, as can a parent, on behalf of the student. Contributors is a new concept. So let's say a student starts the form. they're a dependent student, they may need a parent to come in and fill out part of the FAFSA for them. That parent is now a contributor to the student's FAFSA. They're not the owner of the application. The student is always the owner. But we need that parent's information in order to consider the FAFSA complete. So a new difference to the process as well is that each contributor or role will have their own individual section of the FAFSA to complete. The student will have their section, and when the student has provided consent, filled it out, signed and submitted, in the best case scenario, the student's done. They send an invite to their parent, asking them to come participate. Parent with their own FSA ID logs in, fills out their own section of the FAFSA, consents, signs, and submits that section. And if the parent is the last person we need, then that application as a whole is submitted for processing. Some of the new contributor roles you might hear that we might require based on things like tax filing status or marital status are parent spouse or partner and student spouse. So depending on if they filed their taxes jointly with their current partner or they're recently married or remarried, we may need a second or third person to come in, those spouse roles. That ties in to the communications and invitations workflow. As I mentioned, if we determine that more than one person is required to participate in this FAFSA, we have a way for the user to invite those people to come in. On the back end, we link them to their own FSA ID or to that of their parent. They accept the invitation, fill it out, and submit their section. For the grouping and numbering of FAFSA data elements, we know there's been a lot of talk about how many questions are on the FAFSA. I can tell you that we have a maximum of 49 questions on the FAFSA across all roles, but no one will ever be required to answer all 49. For example, an independent student may answer only 24 or fewer questions in order to complete the FAFSA. Now, each of these questions is composed of a group of data elements. So for example, under the question of identity, we have things like name, date of birth, Social Security. For the question of contact information, we have their physical mailing address, their email, their phone number. So we've logically grouped data elements together into questions. And the question order is driven based on key decision points where the data tells us the user experience should flow. So some of these groupings you're already familiar with. For example, dependency status. That will drive whether we need to potentially invite a parent, or if the student is independent, do we need to invite a spouse? Marital status, tax filing status, all of these key points tell us where we need to drive the user experience. And then data pre-population. This is something we're really excited about. We've heard you that parents complain about not transferring data between multiple students' applications. So one of the great things about this new roles-based system with contributors is that if you are a parent on one application and you have a second child going to school and that second child invites you to participate, by agreeing to participate in that second child's FAFSA, all of the data you provided will automatically transfer over into that second child's application. Yeah, right? Pretty cool. That also works across roles. So say you're a parent saying that the first FAFSA for 24-25 you participated in was for your student, but you go back to school. We will take as many data elements as possible from that application you submitted as a parent and transfer and own it into your student application to, again, minimize the number of questions you have to answer. So whenever possible, we're taking data we already have about you and using it to help you and make your experience smoother. We are also, because we are building the FAFSA from the ground up, from brass tacks, we are trying to resolve as many of the pain points as we can in this new world. One of the things hopefully you're all excited about is no more SafeKey. Yay! Because we are doing the invitation system, there's no need. We're going to be connecting users via the information provided on the invitations to their individual FSA IDs, so there's no need for a SafeKey to pass information back and forth. And as Kira mentioned, no more IRS DRT. With the new FADDX system, we're getting the data directly from the IRS. We are also doubling the number of colleges that can be listed online. So students will now have the option of listing up to 20 colleges on their initial FAFSA form. One thing we're also very excited about that I will show you a screenshot of later is the parent wizard. We've heard that it's always been a pain point of, who's my parent? Who do I put on the FAFSA? Who needs to be here? So we've created a 4-question wizard to make that very clear to students who they need to be asking to participate on this form. Is it one parent? Is it 2 parents? Is it a parent and a step-parent? And I'll walk you through those questions in a few minutes. But we have tried to make it crystal clear who needs to be participating in this FAFSA for the form to be submitted. We also heard a lot that the SAR was not very intuitive. Students didn't really know what student aid report meant, and so we've done a ton of usability testing throughout the creation of this whole form, and this is one of the things that came out of that testing. Based on feedback we got from users about what they thought would make sense for the output of information after they've submitted their FAFSA, we came up with the term FAFSA submission summary. The content is the exact same of the SAR, more or less. It's pretty much an identical document. However, the new name is the FAFSA submission summary, and we're hoping that this will make it more intuitive for users and for you as financial aid administrators to direct your students to find this document if need be. So here we have the parent wizard. As we get into these screenshots, I do want to make it very, very clear that the text on these is not final version. Hence, as Kira had mentioned before, draft in big, bold, watermarked letters. So while the form will look something like this, I wouldn't pay too much attention to the actual words because we are still workshopping and finalizing those. So as you can see, the first question is, are your parents married to each other? Pretty straightforward. If they say no, we ask, do your parents live together? If they still say no, we ask if one parent provided more financial support than the other. Now, the key thing here is if the student says that their parents provided equal support or neither parent provided support, we ask them to proceed with the parent in mind that has the greater income and assets. So with that in mind, I know. Don't shoot the messenger. But at least it's crystal clear, right? So with that parent in mind, we then take them to the final question, is that parent with the greater income or assets remarried? And based on whether they say yes or no, we direct the student to either invite the singular parent or parent and step-parent. And so this is what that invitation screen will look like. So say in this case that it's 2 married parents, and we need the parent and the parent's spouse/partner to come participate in the student's FAFSA. The student will be asked to provide their names, their date of births, their social security numbers, and their email addresses. Now we use things like name and social to try and match against FSA IDs. If the parent already has an FSA ID on file, great. We will link that invitation directly to the parent's account, so the next time they log in, they will see it front and center. If they don't, in that email invitation they receive, and the email the student provides does not have to be the same one associated with the FSA ID, just the best point of contact, the parent will be directed to create an FSA ID at that point. Now, if the student checks that the parent does not have a social security number, we're then going to ask for the parent's physical mailing address to try and make that match instead. This is what that invitation to participate as a parent will look like. So you've gotten the email saying that Kellis has asked you to be their parent on the FAFSA. We need your help. When you log in, you're going to see this on your My Activity screen, that first dashboard page you view, saying that, in this case, Raya, our demo student, has requested your help. By accepting the invitation, you agree to participate in the form. If Raya is my sister, and this is the second FAFSA you're participating on, agreeing to participate in Raya's form will also include that agreement to transfer any data from my FAFSA, the first one you participated in, into Raya's, the second, to make that process easier. If you decline, the invitation will go away, and if you did it by mistake, Raya will have the opportunity to go back and re-invite you. We're also making it easier for people participating in the FAFSA, whether it's the student, the parent, or the spouses, to get a better view of what the status is. In this view, this is the student's view of what they will see. They'll be able to see who they invited, in this case, the two parents. Have the parents accepted the invitations yet? Have they completed their section yet? And we'll have versions of this screen as well for once the FAFSA has been submitted, so that they can keep an eye on and very easily track where their form is. And say, Dad's taken a while to fill out the FAFSA. You can go nudge him. But we wanted to give them the most visibility into the form as possible to really encourage completions. If you're the parent logging in, you'll see a similar version to this screen. And if you did need to invite your spouse to participate, you will also get to see if your spouse has accepted the invitation or completed their section as well. This one's a little bit mislabeled. This is not the confirmation page, but the section completion page. So as I mentioned, each role or contributor will fill out their own section, consent, sign, submit, and be done with their section. And this is what that screen will look like. In this case, the student was the initiator of the FAFSA, and the student has completed their section. So while the student can go and manually complete the parent section, we really encourage the parent to come and do that themselves because it'll save a lot of manual entry. So I know that was a lot to throw at you. Hopefully you feel a little less anxious about it. But if you need to re-review or go back and see the screens again or learn more about it, we have provided some references and resources here, including some of the webinars we've already hosted. But I highly recommend that you go to fsatraining.ed.gov to see the full list of webinars we are offering, including a full FAFSA demo of real screens, what they will look like, and their finalized text later this summer. So now I'm gonna pass it back, or Q&A, I guess. Be kind.
All right, very good. So we're going to start some Q&A. We do have time, so thank you very, very much to Kira and Kellis thank you. Excellent. Appreciate that warm welcome. So as people are coming up to the podium, if you have questions, I'm just going to start with a first question. So it's summer, and in my house, we've recently been trying to do some yard work, and we had sort of a big task. And so I said, all right, I'm gonna start. And my husband came out and he said, all right, I'll be out in just a minute. So in my house, I kind of want to know, like, does that mean you're just going to go back in the house and you're really going to come back in a minute and you're actually going to help me with all the yard work? Or will I see you in 3 hours when I'm almost done? And then you come out and say, oh, you've got this pretty well in hand. So the question is, where might we fall in thinking about the release of the FAFSA in that 31 days in December? We've got an FSA conference that will happen right at the end of November and the beginning of December. Might there be some alignment there with the release of the FAFSA, or might it be closer to holidays?
See tomorrow morning's session with Melanie Story. She will have all that fantastic information for you.
So just like my husband,
Melanie's
you'll see
in
me
the
when you
front
see
row,
me.
like, yes, she'll have the information for you.
All right, we'll start on this side, and we'll ping pong back and forth.
All right, thank you. So I was questioned with the import of the IRS data after consent and with the removal of verification of non-filer. Has long-standing guidance from ED changed that it is considered conflicting information that someone is a non-filer when there is evidence of income above the filing threshold?
Yes, there will continue to be conflicting information that you resolve, but we're not asking you to collect anything necessarily that will trigger that anymore, unless someone is selected for verification.
Verification.
Now, it's not so much that verification and non-filing is going away. It's just that technically,
We don't have to question non-filer status and get a verification?
yeah,
of non-filer?
because what we're doing on the back end is that the IRS is going to say whether or not they have anything, which is essentially what verification and non-filing that you're getting now does, right? It's the IRS giving the student documentation saying we don't have anything. So if they're already going to tell us that through the FADDX, we've already received verification and non-filing. So in the back end of our minds, we've already done that, so there's no use to asking you to do it again.
Okay.
But if you find out that someone was required to file because you found out about income earned from work that was substantial somehow, then it would still be conflicted information.
And would it still be considered conflicting information if a filer's tax status appears to be wrong? Because that was another one we used to have to.
So far, yes. I know.
We may press on that. Thank you.
All right, we're going to take a question over here. It is 9:30 right now. The next session does start at 9:45. So we are going to, try to take a few questions and just go over by a few minutes for those that will find this helpful. So we'll take the first question.
Great. Just a little clarification on the FSA login for non-SSN parents. So does the address need to match anything? Are there matches that need to happen? And what sort of problems or challenges do you foresee with that? And then second, would we still be able to do a paper signature and process the FAFSA that way?
I'll first say that the paper signature is going away.
Okay, thank you.
Everyone will need to sign, if they have an FSAID, everyone will need to sign digitally. There won't be that printout again. For the match for parents without socials, if they already have an FSAID, we will match against that. When they are asked to create an FSAID, we're using a second, because we can't obviously match them with the Social Security Administration if they don't have a social, we're using a secondary method to try and identity proof them.
Which is?
Am I allowed to say?
Oh,
TransUnion.
okay. And so, okay, all right, thank you.
Hello. Will financial aid officers have any visibility into contributor invitations, or if a student hasn't had all those signatures completed, are we able to see any of that to help the student get that completed?
So if the application hasn't been submitted, you won't be able to see anything. However, if, say, the student fat fingers their parent's social or whatever, the student can always go back in and fix that information and resend the invitation.
Thank you.
Yes, hi, my name is Brandy, and I had a question. I noticed on the parent invite that the second parent, it said optional. So do those parents don't have to provide their information, or that, like the spouse of the parent?
It depends. If the student indicates that their parent is married, we're going to prompt them to provide both parents' information to kind of create an ideal situation where one of those parents comes in and helps.
Okay.
And then based on the first parent based on their answers to tax filing status, marital status, et cetera, that'll tell us whether we need the spouse's information.
Okay, so they're not able to opt out of their spouse if they're remarried?
If they're remarried, it depends on if they filed with that remarried spouse 2 years ago in the tax information.
Oh.
Whoever you're married to, if the person you are married to currently is not the same person you filed taxes with 2 years ago, we may need that second spouse to come in.
And is there going to be a consent? So for parents that file separately, taxes
Then both parents would need to come in.
Okay.
If they married filed jointly with their current spouse 2 years ago, whether that's a remarried spouse or not, if they married filed jointly, then we don't need the parent spouse to come in. The parent will just will be asked to provide select information about their spouse.
So there'll be separate consents going to two separate parents that are married that are filed separately?
Both parents in that situation would need to come in, consent individually, and fill out their sections of the FAFSA, yes.
You're saying come in, like we're physically come in somewhere.
Like log in,
Oh,
log
okay.
in, sorry.
Okay. No, that's okay. Thank you so much.
You're going to say something?
Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
Just waiting for you, sorry. Kira, one of the slides you presented, there said that the digital data exchange was going to also pull in dependents on the tax return. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. We haven't seen that before. Is that right?
You know it now as exemptions.
Okay.
But the exemptions no longer exist on the 1040 right now because what was the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act remove exemptions from the 1040. So we're going to get a count of the tax filer, the spouse is appropriate, and the number of dependents that they claimed on the tax return.
So the FAFSA is not going to look at dependents as there's going to be a separate dependent question for the household.
No. It's the FADDX is just going to count. Not the FADDX. The IRS is going to send us a count on the tax return. So let's say it's you, your spouse, and 2 kids dependents on your tax return. So the FADDX is going to say for your child's FAFSA 4. So it's going to tell us, because you and your spouse did married filing jointly, so that's 2, and then you had 2 dependents, your son and your daughter, that's 4. So the FADDX is just going to tell us your family size is 4 based on the 2 filers on your tax return and the 2 dependents on your tax return. It's just going to count.
Okay. And there's not a separate household number and household question?
It's family size. So
Family size.
Yes. So household size is replaced by the concept of family size. And family size is defined by the tax return now, where the household size, as you know it now, was just, we were giving you parameters, and then, the applicant was, or the parent was reporting how many people was in the household size.
Yeah.
But FAFSA Simplification Act says family size is based on IRS code. So it has to go by what's on the tax return.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, we're going to have one more question, and then we're going to, don't forget about the Ask a Fed, and if you want to come up, you might be able to get a couple more questions.
Okay.
But
Good morning. Carrot, thank you so much for lightening up the session for us this morning.
You're welcome.
So I have a question for you. You mentioned that number in college is no longer, it's going to be irrelevant. Did I hear you correctly?
It's no longer embedded in the formula, the SAI formula, but it's still relevant because you can use number in college to make a professional judgment, an adjustment to a student based on the additional costs of an additional child in college.
Okay.
Right.
So will this be a variable item in verification? Would it be necessary to still have it as a verifiable item?
No.
Are we going to be able to still verify it?
You can still select any data element you want for institutional verification. You can.
But I know that there are certain verifiable items that we
Yeah.
have to verify.
So we're not going to list it for
verification.
verification because it's not used for anything for SAI formula or the Pell Grant formula at all. So there's no need for us to select it for verification because there is no use for it. The only time there is a use for it is if you decide to use it. And the assumption is in your process of deciding to use number in college,
Yes.
you've verified
Okay.
for yourself that there is an actual additional person in college that justifies you adjusting something, data element on the FAFSA or the cost of attendance.
Okay, thank you.
You're
Just one more quick question. On the FAFSA, it said, how would the contributor's invitation works if the parent is filling out the FAFSA on behalf of the student?
If the parent initiates the form, then they'll be asked to invite the student to come in.
Okay.
And then the student can accept or decline.
Okay. Thank you so much.
thank you so much. Thanks, everybody, for sticking around, and have a wonderful, wonderful day of all kinds of great information. Thanks, Kira.